take a look at 2025 before I get into what we're preaching for the month of December. So I hope that you'll actually be encouraged by this. I think it's important to have vision. It's important to know just what we want to see the Lord do and accomplish. So let's take a look together at what we're considering for 2025. So we have different categories all the time that we try to focus on and repeat over and over. And we have an internal focus always within our church. Hey, these are some things that we want to see growth in and areas that we want to, really invest in. And so the first one is our weekender conferences. The Lord has used these in a mighty way. And we already have our first one planned in February. And we'll have a second one about the first steps in discipleship, and you'll see that in just a little bit. And then in October, it's either apologetics or on biblical counseling, okay? So these weekenders are coming up. The first one is already kind of set, January 31 through February the 2nd. And the focus here is how to know if you're truly growing. How to know if you're truly growing. Our speaker is Pastor Jeremy McMorris out of Paramount Baptist Church in Abilene, Texas. The topics, the things that they're going to focus on will be sanctification or self-awareness or dealing with stagnation. And I think that happens a lot in our Christian walk, does it not? Am I really growing? Have I plateaued? Am I, able to help other people grow? And so I hope that you'll be excited about coming to this weekender. He's a specialist in this area, and it's going to be great content for us. So kind of one of the things we want to see is the Lord do something really special in our first weekender in the area of growing. Now we want to focus externally. And the elders had a very long conversation about this, and we had different approaches, and we decided on our external, it will be on relational evangelism and discipleship, especially in the area of discipleship of people who just come to know Christ. So we would love to see kind of evangelism in every area of life. And so we read an article together, and in this article, this person who's led many movements around the world spoke of 4 different factors that you need to have to grow this culture, okay? And so the 4 factors are going to be broken up throughout the year. And in the first factor is a season of fasting and prayer. And we're going to talk about that in January and February, fasting and prayer, and make a plan for applying that, teaching on it and then applying it. And then empower, equip, and release. Give people some tools, give some people some opportunities to learn how to share the gospel. And we'll do that during March and April. And then the idea behind extravagant and regular sharing is that the idea of just throwing seed out from the parable of the sower. And then we're just going to call our church to be extravagant in the sharing of the gospel with a friend, with a neighbor, with an acquaintance, with your children, We're going to be very extravagant, and we want to do that the remainder of the year. And then one of the key components is if you get really serious about this, then you have to surrender whatever result God brings. Because God is the one, is he not, that changes the hearts of people. We don't do any of it. We're just supposed to be faithful to give the word. And we have to surrender to whatever outcome. God could make it where you have to deal with things that you didn't plan for. And we want to learn, definitely in September and October, hey, how do we pursue these people that we've given the gospel to? How do we do the next layer? A third aspect that we always focus on is an area of kind of like personal discipleship, okay? And we've been seeing God grow our ladies' ministry tremendously in the last few years. And we want, in the area of discipleship, to focus on men for at least a season in 2025. And the women have a different plan. I've talked to Samantha. She's going to do a digital type of study because there's so many people wanting to get in this, and the ladies. And so they have an approach from January to May that's more digital with like a monthly meeting. It's going to be kind of cool to see her lay that out. But our hearts as elders is to activate men. And we're going to be doing a men's study called the Masculine Mandate. The Masculine Mandate. And as we think about why it's been difficult to reach men at times, or why men cannot commit to Bible study, it's because men have sometimes very complex lives. And so we've even began thinking about doing some extravagant or unusual gathering times. Maybe on the weekdays, it could be early morning, 5:30 to 7. And some of you are like, what? I'm not a morning person. Okay. Maybe you're a late person. We can do something late the kids are in bed or finally kind of settling down for the night, and we can do 8:30 to 9:30. Or maybe a fasting lunch. Nobody eats lunch. We all gather together and just go over the study. Or something extreme on a Saturday, because men need to be with their families, their children, the soccer teams, whatever the chores that happen on a Saturday. So just pray about that. We want to engage men and use radical times to see if we can accommodate their schedules. And then the women will have this really cool, it's called the Bible Recap digital study that Samantha will explain more of. And I'm looking forward to that. Our summer for 2025 is going to be focused on children's ministry and our youth in college. This is a very difficult group. The college group in the RGV is very difficult to reach. And so we've noticed that the summer is the best time to reach them. And so we're looking forward to having some very specialized discipleship and spiritual development for our children. Debbie's working on something for 2025 for that. And then working with our upper youth and college. We're still fully committed to planting the church in Guadalajara. We've partnered with them, and we want to serve in any way possible, from coaching, collaboration in their training, and possibly from the conversations we've had, our first missions trip to Guadalajara is going to happen in 2025. And so we're excited about that. And the 3 projects that we want to kind of see the Lord work in, this is something that we want to see God develop, is Redeemer in Espanol is growing tremendously, and we would like to partner more together with them in very strategic ways with our leadership, with sometimes getting the leaders of different ministries together so they can talk about, hey, how can we do this better, and how can we reach people more effectively? And then, of course, our community property. We need it so bad still. You pray. There's a property I've introduced to the elders that I think is an amazing property. And we'll see what the Lord does in their hearts. But we hope to acquire a property very, very soon. And then we want to expand our community groups, possibly either in Mission or in Alamo. And God is stirring in those areas. And so this is kind of our vision for 2025. I hope some of it will excite you, or when you hear announcements later, you can connect to some of them. The church exists, our mission statement is we exist to know God, to treasure Christ, to love the body, and make disciples. These are our 4 core values, and we hope that the activities that we do, the things that we invest in, only reinforce this. If there is an activity that we're doing that doesn't reinforce this, we just need to get rid of it. I don't care how good it is. It's not helping us in our mission. And so I hope the Lord will do something special there. I also need to introduce to you today, since it's the first Sunday in December, we tend to have a Christmas offering of some kind. The church that we're helping in Guadalajara is exploding. It's exploding. They had 151 people the other day. It's a really, really unique property that they have, and they need to build a roof of some kind. The people are having to sit under trees and sit in the shade of a wall where there's a shadow. And so it's really awkward to preach to all these people. Imagine all of you guys were sitting up on the wall over here or sitting over here underneath the tree because the sun is too powerful. And so we're hoping to raise money to help them build a roof of some kind. And there's other churches helping in this. It's just not us. And so I hope that you'll begin praying about that. There's a special category in our WhatsApp, on our envelopes. Please put on there, special gift for Guadalajara church plant. And then our Christmas Eve service, which is Christmas Eve, that offering that night all goes to this project. All right. Where are we headed for December? We're going to be taking a look at something that is called the Book of Emmanuel. Has anyone ever heard of that before? Can you raise your hand? Very cool. All right. So you're going to learn something new. And this is going to be an Advent study in the book of Isaiah, through the book of Isaiah. And there's a section in Isaiah, chapter 7 through 12. And some people will say all of 1 through 12 is the book of Emmanuel. But this is a really, really neat study. And I think it will be a help to you. You say, why are we taking a pause from Exodus? Well, last year I went through the book of Exodus during December. And kind of every other December, I like to do an Advent thing to help you understand and anticipate the birth of Christ and what it means and how it fits the whole picture of Scripture. I really think you're going to enjoy this. I think you're going to enjoy it. The overview, Advent, that word, as Matthew mentioned, is about anticipation or longing. Anticipation or longing. And what are the people in the Old Testament anticipating? What were they looking forward to? Well, they were looking forward to the restoration of Jerusalem when Messiah would come. Now, it was very confusing for them because at times they would hear things from prophets that felt like it was very near, like, oh, it's going to happen now, and he's going to take care of our enemies, and he's going to restore our temple. And then at times it seemed very distant, and it was a different kind of kingdom, and it was a kingdom that was unusual, and where lions and lambs lay down together. And we're going to take a look at that later. And so for them, it was the restoration of Jerusalem, I think, in their mind. And then in the New Testament for us, when we hear or think about Advent, it's that, hey, we've connected all the things in the Old Testament to the birth of Christ. And we long for Christ to return and establish his new kingdom, right? We long for his appearing, okay? His glorious appearing. And it's super important. This longing, this desire is super pivotal to your spiritual growth. Like if you don't long for it, you're going to have problems, okay? 1 John chapter 3, verses 1 through 2 speak of those who long to see Christ, to long to see him purify themselves in the present. And there's something that happens spiritually to us as we long for Christ and we live for Christ, okay? And so the setting in the book of Isaiah is one of darkness. I would even say hopelessness. And you're going to see an example of that today. Destruction is about to go on full overdrive for the people of Israel. And it's going to drive them into very deep despair. Very deep despair. A sense of hopelessness. And can I just be honest with you? I'm going to nerd out today, y'all. I'm going to nerd out. This is my favorite stuff. We're going to get into the historical weeds. We're going to look at a bunch of text. We're going to just nerd out together so that we can lay a foundation for the rest of the month, okay? And so this setting of darkness in the book of Isaiah is much darker than you and I realize. The timeline, if you're wondering, when does this kind of fall in the history, right? We were in the book of Exodus, and we're going to allude to it today, which is so cool. But the timeline for most people, the pivotal, is that in 722, the Assyrians came in and demolished the northern kingdom, okay? And they deported almost all of them. And what happened during that time, Assyria would supplant people from other countries that they've conquered, and they would scatter them out of their country. That way they could control that territory. And so people were being planted inside of the northern kingdom, the promised land. And all these people were now, if there was anybody left who was an Israelite, they were beginning to intermarry. They're not supposed to, but they're beginning to intermarry and polluting, right, that group of people. And those people in the New Testament are called what class? Samaritans. And so there's all kinds of hatred between Jewish people and Samaritans, and you're going to kind of understand a little bit of that in our study. And then the Assyrians get conquered by the Babylonians, all right? You know them. But the Babylonians are the specific ones who come in and destroy the southern kingdom, or we call it Judah, and destroy them and deport most of them. And you guys remember the stories of Ezra and Nehemiah and all those people trying to restore the temple a little bit and all that kind of jazz? Well, that's going to happen a little bit after the Babylonians. God moves on their hearts to start kind of restoring that. He's going to move on the Persians to do that. So, don't throw anything at me because it's small print. But kind of shows you a little bit of a breakdown of how things are. And that little pink column, this is the tribe of Judah. And there's some kings here that are very popular and normal that Isaiah ministered to, which is Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. All right, and this is in the tribe of Judah. And then that little yellow one, it's short. Why is it short? Because it's the northern kingdom, and they're going to be taken out to never be restored. And then you have another column, and it's got kind of some weird names. It's got Tilgath and Shalmaneser, Sargon. I almost went Lord of the Rings for a second. Sargon, Sennacherib. It is going to get a little bit of Lord of the Rings today, so just know. But that column is the Assyrians. And then the other column that you're going to see is Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians. And so it's a little convoluted, and there's a lot going on, right, in the setting of Isaiah. So go to Isaiah chapter 1. We're going to read verse 1, just to get us going. And keep your Bible open in your lap, because we're going to cover a lot. Here we go. The vision of Isaiah, he is the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah, that's his tribe, his people, and Jerusalem, and here's the list of kings. And he served Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. The name Isaiah means salvation of the Lord, or God saves. So that's his name. His name is salvation of the Lord, or you can say God saves. And he got to rule over quite a few kings. And there's a reason for that. You could go read about this in 1 Chronicles 16 or 1 Kings 16. I'm so sorry, guys, I can't remember. But it talks a lot of the reason why he covered so many kings, because a lot of these kings were wicked, and they would murder each other or do things against each other, or God took them out because they were just a wicked king. And so Isaiah, in his ministry, is covering a dark time for the tribe of Judah. And he's a contemporary of other prophets, which we will look at next week. And chapters 1 through 5 are about judgment. They're primarily about judgment with glimmers of hope. Chapters 1 through 5, if you were to read through it, it would feel pesado. It'd feel heavy, and it's supposed to be, because it's about judgment, all right? Rightful judgment that God is going to enact against his people. But there are glimmers of hope. And think of this as like a trial room where God is going to justify, in a sense, or make his case of why he is going to judge these people. But God is very kind. And in the backdrop of the darkness, there's these glimmers, these little flashes of light that are beautiful and refreshing. And God reminds them of his restoration. You have your Bibles with you? You ready? Go to verse 4. Ah, sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, offspring of evildoers, children who deal corruptly. They have forsaken the Lord. They have despised the Holy One of Israel. They are utterly estranged. And so their condition is one that has rejected God, estranged from him. In verses 16 and 17, there's this, I think, an encouraging call of repentance. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your deeds from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good. Seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead for the widow's cause. And so what he's saying there is that you're practicing all of these horrible things, and he wants them to seek repentance and flip it, go 180 degrees and start living this way. So just so you know why they deserve judgment, is because this is what they're doing to people. They're oppressing widows. I mean, what a dirtbag do you have to be to do that? So they're horrible people taking advantage of people who are destitute, taking advantage of people who are down and out, that cannot defend themselves, the powerless. So this is what's happening in this time. In verse 21, 23, go there. There's this reference to what kind of example they should be, what type of people they should be. They should be these types of servants for the Lord. How the faithful have become a whore. She was full of justice, righteousness lodged in her, but now murderers. Your silver has become dross, your best wine mixed with water. Your princesses are rebels and companions of thieves. Everyone loves a bribe and runs after gifts. They do not bring justice to the fatherless, and the widow's cause does not come to them. So they are an unfaithful city. They were supposed to be a city on a hill where people could come to them, but they are an oppressive and ugly city. Evil is rampant. And look at the contrast of chapter 1, verses 26. When he says, one day I will restore. He says, I will restore your judges as at the first, and your counselors as at the beginning. Afterward you shall be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. All right? And so he longed to make him that. Zion shall be redeemed by justice, and those in her who repent. Is this not hopeful? Who repent by righteousness. But rebels and sinners shall be broken together, and those who forsake the Lord shall be consumed. And so there's this hope of, like, you can be restored to what you were meant to be. And so chapters 1 through 5 give us and paint us this picture of this judgment that's coming, because they are not living up to the ideals and vision that God had for them. In chapter 3, jump over there, you're going to see different woes. There's all these woes, like, whoa, all right? Like, wake up, it's super bad. And we'll just look at verses 8 and 9. It says, for Jerusalem has stumbled, and Judah has fallen, because their speech and their deeds are against the Lord, they're defying his glorious presence. Watch this. For the look on their faces bears witness against them. They proclaim their sin like Sodom. They do not hide it. Woe to them, for they have brought evil on themselves. If you want to know what's going on here, it's just that they are shameless in their evil deeds. And it is a sign, and this is why we get nervous when we look at our culture, right? When people can do evil and be proud of it. When people can do wrong and almost, boast in it. And you're just like, that's an evil culture if it's in that condition. And there was an evil place where they would oppress people, harm people, do all kinds of evil things, and they didn't care. They didn't care. There was no shame, all right? They were like in the days of Sodom. And in verse 15, you see how much they practice oppression. It says, am I right? I'm right there. What do you mean by crushing my people? By grinding the face of the poor, declares the Lord. Just that image of crushing poor people, all right? Just because you have authority or power or prominence. And so they practice oppression. And then we'll go to chapter 5, verse 20, and here's a woe about their arrogance. Chapter 5, verse 20. And this is just so arrogant. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and shrewd in their own sight. And so they're very arrogant. They get to call the terms, and they get to define everything. This is what I'm going to be loud and proud. Or even just think about that, right? Like how the homosexual issue has been like it's a pride thing. That's a flipping of things on purpose. That is trying to manipulate things that should be shameful. Let's be proud about them, all right? And they're called evil good and good evil. So this is the situation we're in. It's pretty dark, and it's making a case of God's justification for the judgment that is coming. All right? And it's going to be pesado. The northern tribes are gone forever. All right? It's heavy. Now, let's have some encouragement. Chapter 2, verses 2 through 5, there are glimmers in here of what God is up to. And in chapter 2, verses 2 through 5, he talks about establishing a mountain. And he says in verse 2, "It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be lifted above the hills, and all the nations." This is the vision that God had for Israel. You would bless all nations. And he says, all the nations shall flow to it. And many people shall come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." Oh, in there. And so there's this hope of what you could be, Israel. What you could be, Judah, is this place that draws people to it, to know God and to learn of him and to be blessed. And then we get the introduction, and it's in other parts of the Bible. It's in Jeremiah, it's in Zechariah, but it's the first time introduced here in Isaiah. And if you'll go to chapter 4, verses 2 through 6, I'll read all of it. It's the introduction of the branch. And you're like, what is he talking about, Chago? It's where their hope is going to be for their restoration. Chapter 4, verses 2 through 6. "In that day, the branch of the Lord shall be beautiful and glorious. And the fruit of the land shall be the pride and honor of the survivors, this remnant of Israel. And he who is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem, they're going to be called holy. And everyone who has been recorded for life in Jerusalem, when the Lord shall have washed away the filth," this is the beautiful thing, that God's going to wash away their filth, "of the daughters of Zion, and cleansed the bloodstains of Jerusalem from its midst by a spirit of judgment and by a spirit of burning. Then the Lord will create over the whole side of Mount Zion and over her assemblies." Now here's the reference to Exodus. What's happened is that God's presence has basically left this region. And he says, one day the branch will restore it all, and my presence will return. And look at the imagery that we have to Exodus. And he says, "Then the Lord will create over the whole site of Mount Zion and over her assemblies a cloud by day, so that the sun's not burning them all the time, and a fire by night. For over all the glory there will be this canopy. There will be a booth for shade by day from the heat, and for a refuge and a shelter from the storm and rain." And so this branch is going to restore the presence of God that's left it, right? Because of their sin and judgment, God's presence has been pushed away. And he says one day this righteous branch will bring all of this back. It's going to bring back the presence of God. And go now to verse 5. Chapter 5 is this beautiful poem about how God loved a vineyard, and he developed it and tended it and took care of it. And then they forsake him, and he has to burn things up. But the end of chapter 5, before we get in chapter 6, has a verse. Go to the end of chapter 5. And I'm just going to, it talks about lions coming in and stuff, but look at 30b, and it says, "And if one looks to the land," so this is the condition of the promised land. "And if one looks to the land, behold, darkness, distress, and the light is darkened by its clouds." And so, chapter 5 ends in a very dark way. Mordor. Anyone? Okay. And that's the image I have in my mind, all right, is Mordor. And I think, trust me, Tolkien is having a lot of this same imagery coming from the Bible. It's dark, it's desolate, We're going to find out that they can't grow anything anymore. All right? The enemies throw rocks into their field so they can't produce things. And so the imagery that is given to us, the setting that is given to us, we're not even into the book of Emmanuel yet. The setting is one that is very, very dark and very hopeless. Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is very famous, class. Does anybody want to just give me an answer why? Anybody? Anybody? Isaiah 6? The great call, right, of Isaiah. So God needs to purify people. God needs to restore people. And now God's going to do that for one man. God's going to do that for one man, for Isaiah. It is a beautiful, beautiful story of personal redemption. It is a beautiful story of personal redemption. It's probably one of the most powerful sections, honestly, in the book of Isaiah. All right? And so he goes to the temple, and lo and behold, he didn't expect to run into God, but he does. And he runs into his presence, and through that whole process, he realizes that he is a wicked, wicked man. He lives in a country, in a land of unclean people, and even himself, he is full of pollution and poison, and he has unclean lips, and an angel comes down and grabs a coal and touches his lips to purify him. And it's a beautiful story of a single man's redemption in a very dark land. Okay. And he's given a mission. And God says, I have a mission that needs to happen. It needs to go forth. And his wonderful response, class, is, here am I. Send me. And he doesn't even know what God's going to ask of him. And we find out at the end of chapter 6, he's going to ask him to do very, very hard things. So jump down with me to the immediate ministry he has. It's verse 11 through 12. And it says, then I said, how long, O Lord? Because he's just heard about what he's going to do. He's going to preach to people who reject him. How long, O Lord? And he said, until the cities lie waste, without inhabitants, and houses without people. And the land is a desolate waste. And the Lord removes people far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. And so his near ministry that's in front of him in his lifetime is to be the usherer, all right? To be the one who introduces devastation. What a hard ministry. Imagine if God called you to that. What are you going to do for the next 30 years? You're just going to utter in devastation. So there are many desolate places, and there's less and less. And in the midst of that bottoming out, I feel like I would have been bottomed out. God gives one of the most beautiful, hopeful pictures in the Bible. And that's in verse 10. And it says, and though a tenth remain in it, so devastation, there's maybe just a small semblance of people here. And only if a tenth remain in it, it will be burned again. Do you understand what he's saying? Okay, let's say there's 10%. I'm going to burn it again. I'm going to bring down judgment again. It's like, think back to Abraham saying, God, would you rescue 100? Would you rescue 5? You know, he brings it down to like 10 or something like. Somebody help me out with that. I don't remember that. And God, this is what's happening in this scenario. He says, I'm going to burn it again. Judgment's coming. Like a terebinth or an oak, whose stump remains when it is felled. This is beautiful. The holy seed is in that stump. The picture that God has given to Isaiah is that your country is going to be burned and every tree cut down. And then if there's like a little bit of life somewhere, let's burn it again. And in the picture of that desolation, God gives a future reality to Isaiah. And he says, oh, but there's a holy seed in that stump. It might look burnt. It might look over. But I've made a promise that my seed, the Davidic line, would stay alive even at the most bottoming out moment ever, because I will keep my promise. You don't need to go there, but in chapter 11, in this section, 7 through 12, called the Book of Emmanuel by many, there's this wonderful chapter, and we're going to study it in about 4 weeks, where it starts in chapter 11, verse 1. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse. I said there was a seed in it, but one day there's going to actually spring life out of that seed. And it's going to come out of a dead, burnt stump. It's coming. And this is what is super exciting about the book of Isaiah, is that in the midst of its judgment and harshness and reality of evil and oppression, God is going to remain faithful. And now, class, this takes us to the book of Emmanuel. The book of Emmanuel is chapter 7 through 12. Chapters 7 through 12 of Isaiah, by many scholars, has been considered the book of Emmanuel because it has the most references to a child being born, to a child coming, to one who would be called Emmanuel. And so we're going to take the rest of December, chapter 7, chapter 8, parts of 10, chapter 11, and then it ends with a celebratory chapter, chapter 12, which is all just celebrating God for his great salvation. And that's how we'll end the month of December, is celebrating God together because a child showed up. And in the darkest of times, the light did come. And he kept his word and he kept his promise. So you should have Isaiah chapter 7 in front of you. Let's go read it together real quick. Here we go. In the days, and now it turns historical. It wasn't historical very much at all, but now it comes into like very historical. Okay. In the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, Rezin the king of Syria, and Pekah the son of Remaliah, the king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem to wage war against it. When the house of David was told, Syria is in league with Ephraim, the heart of Ahaz and the heart of his people shook as the trees of the forest shake before the wind. So what is the setting, Chago? Ahaz is the king of Judah. And we saw his granddaddy, all right, which was Uzziah, and Uzziah passed away already. You can read again about that in 1 Kings 16 or 1 Chronicles 16, I can't remember. But Ahaz is given and presented to us in this story as an evil and disbelieving king. He embodies Israel, all right? He embodies Israel, their mindset, why they're going to be judged. And there's a conspiracy going on. And the conspiracy is between Rezin and Pekah, okay? And one guy is from Syria, not Assyrian, from Syria. And this other person is representing Ephraim. I used to get confused about this when I was a kid. But when you hear the northern kingdom and you hear the word Ephraim, it's like a nickname. Ephraim was one of the tribes. They had one of the larger holdings of land. And so they would, in a nickname, say, they wouldn't say the northern tribes. They would just say Ephraim as encapsulating all of them, okay? Maybe like the Confederacy, the Union, something like that. And so there's a conspiracy going on, and they're coming. They're at the door of coming down to destroy Jerusalem. And what is happening, guys? In this setting, we find out that there are shaking people. I don't know about you, but this really resonated with me. We are shaking like the wind when it goes through the trees. What a description. These people are in utter fear. Shaking. What are we going to do? What's going to happen to us? We're going to die. These people are in utter paralysis of fear. And Isaiah now comes. Let's read. Go on. And it says in verse 3, and the Lord said to Isaiah, go out to meet Ahaz, you and Shira-Jashub, your son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway of the washer's field. That's an important location. Hezekiah is going to fix this, but there was not an aqueduct into the city. So this was the only place where they got fresh water into the city. And so enemies would try to take out their water supply. Hezekiah fixes that later. You can read about that. But at this stage of the game, they're in a very strategic location. So he goes to meet with him and he says to him, be careful. Be quiet. Do not fear. And do not let your heart be faint because of these two smoldering stumps of firebrands, at the fierce anger of Rezin in Syria and the son of Remaliah. I'll just end it there. So what happens here is Isaiah goes out. And I'm going to talk more about his children later, okay? But he tells him to take his kid with him. And there's going to be a reason for that. He's going to have another child later. And it's the same thing that happened to... who's the one that had children named after stuff? I lost it. Who's the one that adulteress? I can't remember. Yeah, Gomer, and what's his husband? Was it Hosea? Yeah, it was Hosea. So Hosea had to name kids specifically as a way of prophetically communicating things to Israel. Well, that's what happens to Isaiah. And his son, here named Shir-Jashub, his name literally means a remnant shall return. Go take your son with you. When you talk to the king, go take your son with you. So he can see that you've named him, that God is going to keep his promises. The remnant will return. And in their shaking moment, I love the counsel that comes from Isaiah. From God through Isaiah, and he says, be careful. And I think sometimes when you're in a shaking fear moment, when you're in a moment of utter panic, you just need to sober up. You just need to sober up. You're being driven by irrational fear, and you're going to make stupid decisions like making alliances, in this case, Ahaz with Assyria. And Isaiah saying, don't do it. Don't do it. Sober up. Be careful. Guess what? Be quiet. Be quiet. And I think sometimes we need to listen to God and go, yeah, I just need to be quiet and wait on the Lord here. I need to wait patiently. He will always, always keep his word. Stop fearing. To me, that's just calm down. And then this idea that he mentions at the very end about their heart failing is don't be overwhelmed. Steady yourself. Steady yourself. And Isaiah's trying to get him to remember that they have God, Yahweh, on their side. And Ahaz is forgetting that. Ahaz, in this moment of crisis, and he's where he's at for all kinds of wickedness and sin and stuff is built up in his life, so he doesn't even really want God to be his ultimate solution. Ahaz is just like all the people, shaking, and is ready to make a relationship with Assyria. Now, Assyria's been coming on the scene, and they are knocking out countries left and right. They're the big dogs in town. And so Ahaz is going to try to say, can I just hook up with them so that they can take out the northern kingdom and take out Syria? This is where his temptation is at. And I don't know about you, but the reality is here that God basically says this. Let's compare these dudes to God. And let's see if you can pick up on it as we read. So go back to chapter 7. He kind of already said it, and he's like, are you kidding me? These firebrands, they're smoldering. They're on the way out. That's one of the things he says when he says they're firebrands. Verse 5, and he says, because Syria with Ephraim, that's the northern kingdoms, and the son of Remaliah, they've devised evil against you, saying, let us go up against Judah and terrify it, and let us conquer it for ourselves and set up the son of Tabeel as king in the midst of it, the king of Syria. Thus says the Lord God, I will not stand, and it will not come to pass. That's what God says through Isaiah. It ain't happening. These guys are not going to defeat us or take us out. And then I think he does a little bit of name calling. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin. Within 65 years, Ephraim will be broken to pieces, so that it will no longer be a people. And I think what you see there is God calling these people out. Like, are you kidding me? You're fearing them more than you fear me. And the head of Ephraim, verse 9, is Samaria. And the head of Samaria is the son of Remaliah. And that's kind of like a little dig. He doesn't even mention the king's name. And this is the key line. If you are not firm in faith, you will not be firm at all. And so God is trying to wake up these shaking people and says, are you kidding me? And he calls out their little countries and their little petty leaders and says they're a bunch of firebrands. I've already prophesied the northern kingdom is gone forever in 65 years. This is not going to happen, Ahaz. They are not going to take you out. Stop being irrational. And here's a very, very practical point. I'm just going to tell you this from my own experience, but also from having the opportunity to counsel many, many people who are shaking at times in life. Guys, most of our fears, they're not real. If my daughter doesn't get into that college, her life is ruined. Really? Really? If she doesn't have the most perfect experience ever in middle school, she's ruined. Really? Really? If she experiences true heartbreak from a boyfriend, she'll be scarred forever. Really? If my business goes bankrupt, we're doomed forever. Really? Ask business people. They'll tell you businesses come and go all the time, every day. The most successful people in the world have been bankrupt 2 or 3 times. So often, the reason we shake is because we're filled with fears. They're not real. Not if you're a Christian. If you're a Christian, they're not real. You will never be forsaken. You will never be left high and dry. I have never seen the righteous begging bread, the Psalms say. And God knows reality here. 65 years and this kingdom is gone. Don't make stupid alliances with the Assyrians, with these evil people. Trust me. Trust me. And I really believe the truth in this text is stand firm in the faith or you will not stand at all. Stand firm in believing God, in believing His word, believing His promises, or you will not stand at all. And this is Isaiah's call to Ahaz and to the people. So, what happens next? There's a response. Would you look down with me? I love that phrase there. I think it's awesome. If you're not firm in faith, you will not be firm at all. And here's what God says, basically. Again, the Lord spake to Ahaz, ask a sign of the Lord your God. God, Let it be deep as Sheol or as high as heaven. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, and I will not put the Lord to the test. And he said, Hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you to weary men, that you weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. What God does in his kindness to Ahaz, and he doesn't take advantage of it, is he goes big. This is so kind of God. Ahaz, ask any sign you want. Dream big, bro. Anything you want, so that you'll believe me that you don't have to give in to the Assyrians. Ask it. Go big. Ask for fire to come down. Ask for your enemies to die tomorrow. Go big to show you that I am in charge. This is a trust exchange here. God's going to show you. Almost every commentator says that Ahaz has a pious response that is full of unbelief. I don't want to hear your sign. We know this because Ahaz has already made his decision to go with Assyria. And so Ahaz's pious response of, I don't think I should test God here. I don't know if I should really seek God out on this. It's just his unbelief on display. And so God in the midst of all that's going on, goes big. The hope after all the judgment that's coming down on them, and the light that is going to be in this very dark place, is a promise. It's a promise of a son, of a child, of a king. The branch that was mentioned in chapter 4 and the stump in chapter 6 and the shoot out of this stump in chapter 11. God goes big as a sign to reassure Ahaz, and he says, you're going to have God with you. Don't choose Assyria. I'm going to send a baby, and his name will be Emmanuel, and he will be God with you. And if this is the solution that they're giving him in his near practical moment, it's the solution that we have for ourselves in our life. When you're shaking in fear and in distress about irrational things that are probably not going to come to pass, in your anxiety and in your darkness, you know what I should tell you and what anybody else should tell you? God is with you. God's with you. It's God with us. And God went big in sending Emmanuel. In the story, in the context, this is supposed to give some comfort to Ahaz. God's with you, man. These kingdoms, they're all going to be destroyed, even Assyria. You remember when Assyrians, they all come and they get blinded? You can read about that later in Isaiah. Pretty cool story. God does crazy town stuff to protect his remnant. But the far prophecy here is that God is going to keep his promise, man. You have to survive, Judah. There has to be a remnant. Because the seed has to come through you. The Davidic line must go. Why? Because all the way back in Genesis 3:15, the seed will crush the serpent's head. And I've got to keep my word that a man will be born who will make it God with us. And that leads us to Matthew 1:21-23. Angel tells Joseph, man, don't fear. Don't fear. Why? Because your wife will bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. This is what Isaiah was named for, what he lived for he will save his people from their sins. And all this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, The virgin shall be with child, and she shall bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which is translated God with us. I don't know the shaking that's happening in your life. I don't know the moments of freak out that you go through, sleepless weeks. And I will tell you, the solution for Ahaz and the solution for you is that God is with you. What do you really believe and what do you really trust? Ahaz is going to show us that he really trusts Assyria. Assyria is his ticket out. But I encourage us today, stand firm in the faith. Stand firm in the faith. Believe what God says. God went big. Any sign you want, Ahaz, I'm going to confirm to you and settle your heart. Any sign, as deep as hell and as high as heaven, and I'll give it to you so that you can trust me. I don't want to test you, God. Then I'll give you one. Listen up, line of David. My son is coming, and he will be named Emmanuel. The same solution that they had then is the same solution we have. We focus on our Savior. We set our eyes on Christ. He will assuage your fears. He will settle your shaking moments. I said it last week, and I'll say it again as we close with our two songs here. We're very unfaithful people. We're going to sing, "Oh, Come All You Unfaithful." We're very unfaithful people who has a very faithful God. And so please don't look at yourselves like, I know God's word enough and I have it figured out and I'm going to respond really well. It's not meant for you to look at yourselves at all. You're meant to look at Christ, who is faithful, who will keep his word, who will never leave or forsake you. You have a God who said in Romans 8:32 that how he did not spare his own son, but freely gave him up for us all. How will he not freely give you all things? No, I'm going to press. God's not going to make me happy. I got to make a stupid choice now. I got to take ownership. And I'm like, he gave up his son, slaughtered him on your behalf so that he can give you all things. Stand firm in that. I trust that. Because if I don't stand for that, then I won't stand for anything. He is Emmanuel, God with us. Let's pray. Father, I just thank you for your word today. I thank you, Lord, for this amazing, amazing, amazing story in the Bible. And how you have orchestrated it and redeemed people groups and individuals through it. And here we see today, God, a beautiful introduction into who this Emmanuel is. He is your promised son. He is the one that will make it a reality that God will be with us forever. And I just want to point people to Christ today. I pray that they will set their sight on him and that their fears will be assuaged, that they will stop their shaking because they have put their hope in Christ. Do that now, even through our singing in Jesus' name. Amen.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below.